of the microphone this morning. Once we grasp the meaninglessness that Ecclesiastes talks about of living in this world, how none of it is under our control, no matter how desperately we want it to be, how do we live? One option is to run from reality, like a fool, he will call us. Party hardy, laugh. You can live in the past. That's an option. Or fantasize about the future. The teacher says all of this is meaningless. So what is better? To learn to live wisely in God's world, even though it is broken. And here's a surprising conclusion. Not even being wise will tell you everything you want to know. Another book of wisdom in the Old Testament is Job, and he says the same thing. He says, where then does wisdom come from? Where does understanding dwell? It is hidden from the eyes of every living thing, concealed even from the birds in the sky. Destruction and death say, only a rumor of it has reached our ears. God understands the way to it, and he alone knows where it dwells. It's humbling that we human beings don't know where to find wisdom. God says that for us, wisdom means the reverent fear of God and turning from evil. That's it. It doesn't say wisdom gives us control over anything, except maybe our own actions. Job and the teacher say the same thing. Wisdom doesn't give us God's perspective. Wisdom teaches us to trust God's perspective. And we can learn to love the limitations that God puts on us. The first one we've talked about already in this series, and that's death. According to the teacher, we can love not death itself, heaven forbid, but the invitation that death is holding out to us. This chapter 7 begins with, a good name is better than fine perfume, and the day of death is better than the day of birth. It is better to go to a house of mourning than to go to a house of feasting. For death is the destiny of everyone, and the living should take this to heart. Our lives are limited by the fact of death. Death is the destiny of everyone, and the living should take it to heart. That invitation that death gives us, it reminds us of all of our limits and that we should appreciate them. Look at this metaphor. A good name is better than fine perfume. Well, of course, we'd say. Our reputation is more important than how good we smell or how good we look. But in that very same sentence, he says, and the day of death is better than the day of birth. Now that's confusing. Why? When you look at a newborn, all you see is potential, right? Sure, that's wonderful, but there's no real wisdom to be gained by that. But when you're at a memorial service or funeral, after a person has lived out their life, and you listen to what people say, then you can actually be inspired. They might say, she loved Jesus so much, or he was so generous. She lived for other people, or he had great faith. Or you can learn something that isn't much at all. She was a wonderful cook, or he sure was good at pickleball. It may never be said out loud at a memorial, but sometimes there's this unspoken message of, well, she lived completely for herself. The day of death is better than the day of birth, not because death is better than life, it's not, but because when life ends, everything else comes into focus. The things that don't matter, that we gave so much time to, can seem empty and pointless. But the lives we touched, the generosity that we showed, the love we gave, that means so much more. The teacher is saying, don't be a fool. Look forward to the day of your death and ask yourself, what kind of person should I be now? We know that the teacher isn't saying we should avoid all pleasure. He made that clear already, that we should enjoy God's gifts, including eating and drinking and the work that God has given us to do. He says that's to live wisely, to live, but it is to live in the shadow of death, not morbidly, but in a way that gives us real depth of soul, depth of character. Death's invitation to us is to be a person who knows that living a good life means preparing to die a good death. We're invited to really live, to be completely engaged in the world and with our family and with our Christian brothers and sisters and the goodness of creation. As I said, it's one thing that we can control, and even that is limited. That's ourselves. We appreciate God's gifts as gifts, not permanent possessions. One day our time will be up. We need to be ready to let go. There's another limitation the teacher calls attention to in this chapter, and that's the limitation of wisdom. I'm going to drop down and look at what he says in verse 23. All this I tested by wisdom, and I said, I am determined to be wise. But this was beyond me. Solomon, who we believe wrote this book, was always the smartest guy in the room, right? But even his wisdom had its limits. If Solomon didn't get it, normal folks like you and me will never understand it all. That doesn't mean wisdom is useless. And then he gives us 4 examples. For example, extortion turns a wise person into a fool, and a bribe corrupts a heart. Money. Even a wise person can become a fool when the dollar signs flash. Everyone has their price, right? That's the saying. But the teacher says to us, prove that saying wrong. Don't be the kind of person who can be bought. We can't maintain our integrity when tempted unless we accept limits on our desires. We can learn to love our limits. Another example, next verse. The end of a matter is better than its beginning, and patience is better than pride. To see a project through to its end is better than to be the kind of person who starts and never finishes. Patience, as we all know, is a virtue. Anything worthwhile takes time to develop and grow. So give everything the time it needs. Another limit, we cannot force outcomes. No matter how much we may want to, we will hit a limit, and patience in that moment is better than thinking that we can force things to change. A third example, anger. Do not be quickly provoked in your spirit, for anger resides in the lap of fools. Everyone comes up with serious frustrations every day, by which I mean the traffic on the Carretera. So the teacher says, do what it takes to lengthen that fuse of yours. Attend a funeral and realize that one day you'll be dead too. Is it really worth being the kind of person who loses their temper? If you are a fool. We can't control everything that provokes us. We can control ourselves. Anger is foolish. Example number 4. Nostalgia. Now that's an odd one. But he says, do not say, why were the old days better than these? For it is not wise to ask such questions. The good old days. My father used to say, good they're gone. But maybe things were better way back when, in some ways. But when you start asking why, you're denying God's presence in the here and now. Is God no longer in control? Did he stop loving you? Does he not have a plan for you anymore? To ask this question is unwise because it forgets about God. Often when we ask this, it's because we're blind to the good things of the present and basically forgetting the evils of the past. When you experience nostalgia, your heart is longing for a more beautiful person than you've ever really met, or a more beautiful place than you've ever really been. You think you're longing for the past, but the past was never as good as your mind is telling you that it was. C.S. Lewis, the famous author, had a lot to say about nostalgia. He even saw a positive purpose for it. He said, these things, the beauty, the memory of our own past, are good images of what we really desire. But if they are mistaken for the thing itself, they turn into dumb idols, breaking the hearts of their worshipers. But they are not the thing itself. They are only the scent of a flower we have not found, the echo of a tune we have not heard, news from a country we have never yet visited. And of course, here he is talking about the kingdom of heaven. In other words, in nostalgia's wisdom, we truly seek the heavenly kingdom of God. But if we foolishly believe that beauty is found in the past, we miss it. Remember how in Ecclesiastes 3, the teacher said that God has placed eternity in our hearts? We are built for a different home than this one. Something that we can't find here. Wise people who understand how God made us to long for him and to long for heaven don't look backward when they get nostalgic. They allow that feeling to point them forward to where it will be good. They look up to heaven and to home. After all, we have limits. We cannot go backwards. Our lives are limited. Our wisdom is limited. Here's what the teacher says. Wisdom, like an inheritance, is a good thing and benefits those who see the sun. Wisdom is a shelter, as money is a shelter. But the advantage of knowledge is this. Wisdom preserves those who have it. Consider what God has done. Who can straighten what he has made crooked? When times are good, be happy. But when times are bad, consider this. God has made the one as well as the other. Therefore, no one can discover anything about their future. Wisdom has limits. Wisdom cannot straighten what God has made crooked. We can't explain, for example, why a young mother would die of cancer, or why the bad guys get to drive those cool narco trucks and we don't. Wisdom can never achieve the kind of control over your life and destiny that you want. It can help you with your money, with impatience, with anger, with nostalgia, but it can't foretell your future. The best we can do is to learn to love these limits and live the lives that God has chosen for us. There is often great creativity in living fully, even within our limits. It's something people admire. Think of the athletes in the Paralympics. They have obvious limitations that they must work within, but they still pursue great goals. Or think of the poet who decides to write a sonnet. So many rules, 14 lines, A, B, whatever. I don't even know the rules of a sonnet. And yet within those limits, the poet can create great beauty. And it might not be as beautiful if that same creativity was expressed as free verse. Likewise, when we acknowledge that our wisdom is limited, we can choose to depend on God all the time. And then, when we do that, we can do something amazing. Wisdom begins when we stop resenting the truth that we're not in control and remember that God is. The fool spends life demanding answers. The wise person learns trust. The fool spends life trying to escape limitations. The wise person discovers that some of God's greatest gifts are found within them. Death teaches us what matters. Wisdom teaches us what we can and cannot control. Longing teaches us that we were made for another country. All of them point us back to the same God. The God who knows the end from the beginning. The God who understands wisdom perfectly. The God who holds our future even when we can't see it. The wisdom of loving our limits, not enduring them, not resenting them, not merely accepting them, loving them, is ultimately the wisdom of trusting God. Trusting him with the parts of our lives that we could never control in the first place. Will you answer the invitation that death gives us to teach us about the limitations of our lives? Will you let its inevitability reshape your goals and your attitudes, the things you long for and work for and pray for and hope for? Then you will be wise. Amen.